This is how to read Jin Ping Mei Chapter 27. In the embroidery version, Li Ping'er whispers about the Jade Pavilion, and Pan Jinlian gets drunk and makes a fuss about the grape trellis. 1. The world's #1 obscene book. This response is the most famous episode of Jin Ping Mei as the world's #1 obscene book. Just as if you don't read Water Margin, you will know that Jingyang Wusong fights tigers. And if you don't read Dream of Red Mansions, you will also know that Lin Daiyu Hodan buried flowers. The common people do not read Jin Ping Mei, but when it comes to Jin Ping Mei, it will be called Pan Jinlian's Great Rack. And the level of understanding of it is as good as Soraui and Iijima. Regarding such a result, scholars who are engaged in the research of Jin Ping Mei can only laugh. Is this the result that the banned book wanted? The book touches on adultery. Is it wrong? Whether you read or not, the books are still there. Whether you are promiscuous or not, the books are still there. The world is like this. Why can't books be like this? If the world is originally a gray chaos, but art is required to be clear and peaceful, singing and dancing, then this world is worth despising. People who read have their own thoughts and opinions. After all, books are books, and life is life after all. Taking all the magic elixirs will not turn readers into Sun Wukong, and reading all the Water Margin of the Three Kingdoms will not turn readers into rogues and bandits. People who read Jin Ping Mei must learn to read the whole book, not each fragment, let alone imitate from it. Why bother to imitate? This book is actually imitating the world. Of course, I do not deny that there are a lot of scenes in this book, especially this chapter, that are not suitable for children. It is difficult to imitate the magical elixir and the roar in the mountains, but these human affairs scenes are really not difficult. Jia Baoyu even invited Shi Ren to co-lead the police fantasy secret, not to mention the colorful young people who are now in a world full of flowers. So the key is to learn to read more deeply. Because it is profound, it can penetrate the surface of the words. Because it is profound, it can form a strong personality. The sexual description in this chapter is very different from the other chapters. It can even be said that the sexual description is the theme of this chapter. However, what is very strange is that the title of this chapter is Li Ping'er Whispers in the Jade Pavilion, and Pan Jinlian is drunk and making a scene in the Great Rack. From the two things shown in the title, we can't see any sexual description here at all. However, comparing the content this time, we found that the content of Li Ping'er's whisper was that she was pregnant, and at this time her and Simon King's sex changed. It has become a purely static method that conforms to the normal logic of couples. While Pan Jinlian was drunk and making trouble in the Great Rack, Pan Jinlian was not deeply drunk. But on the contrary, she felt as if she was drunk and dreaming because of sex. Compared with the other chapters in the embroidered portrait book in terms of nature, the embroidered portrait book's answers far exceed those in the embroidered portrait book. In terms of number and extent, the title content of this chapter seems to be very serious, and this seems to be unintentional. Deliberately, why? I think the big structure of the story of Jin Ping Mei is implicit here. We mentioned in chapter 23 that although Song Huilian was the protagonist of the story, at that time, the title highlighted Pan Jinlian and Li Ping'er. By this time, Song Huilian was dead, and the war for Favor Map 3.0 could finally be completed. The fight started hotly. From the following text, the theme of this war is, Li Ping'er has wealth and children, who are as precious as emeralds. She is satisfied with her quiet years and simply pursues her stability in this world. So her subsequent life has the shadow of whispers. Pan Jinlian has no children and no money. She is like a jealous grape. In order to win favor, she does her best in talent and sex, and gradually enters a state of almost hysterical madness. This can probably be regarded as the shadow of drunk and noisy. From this point of view, the unique title and profound connotation of the 27th chapter have a very profound significance in expressing the theme of the whole book. I even wanted to add insult to injury and make a comparison with the 27 chapters of Dream of Red Mansions. The title of that episode was Concubine Young Plays with Colorful Butterflies in Dakui Pavilion, and the Flying Swallows Weep in the Incense Grave. We all know that burying incense tombs and weeping in red refers to Lin Daiyu's iconic song of burying flowers, just like Pan Jinlian's iconic grape trellis. As for concubine Young playing with colorful butterflies, it refers to Zhu Baochai's fluttering of butterflies in the spring garden. I overheard he went to the maid to talk about blaming Lin Daiyu. The two appear as a contrast in the title. If Song of Burying Flowers describes Lin Daiyu's life tragedy, does playing with colorful butterflies hint at Zhu Baochai's terrible stain of duplicity? Although A Dream of Red Mansions has not been finished, and Zhu Baochai's blaming did not have a substantial effect. In the first 80 chapters, Zhu Baochai also showed many times astonishing cunning and scheming in the later chapters, which is completely different from Lin Daiyu's true feelings and frankness. Different, maybe it's a coincidence. The same 27 chapters, similar expression techniques. However, for modern readers who are bored, if the author of Jin Ping Mei really had such intentions, if A Dream of Red Mansions really learned such a structure from Jin Ping Mei, then wouldn't reading become a particularly interesting thing? Isn't literature particularly interesting? 2. The Most Beautiful Garden. The Most Tertiary World. The main story this time takes place in the garden. As mentioned earlier, gardens are often opposed to secular etiquette, because the garden itself has a beauty that transcends life. This is a day in midsummer. The red sun is in the sky, and thunderstorms hit in an instant. It is clear after the rain, and a rainbow shines through the sun. The gentle rain is moistening the green rocks, and the evening breeze is cool and clear in the courtyard. The garden is full of life everywhere. The beauties of the garden beauty gang were wandering around the garden in homely summer clothes, with pink faces, oily hair, red lips and white teeth, and their every move and gesture exuded the beauty of youth. Picking flowers, arranging flowers, wearing flowers, sending flowers, from real flowers to garden beauties. They are everywhere, the image of flowers and the symbol of beauty. What's even more valuable is that they also showed the beauty of art together. Remember, this is the only ensemble appearance of the garden beauties in the Golden Lotus. Pan Jinlian played the pipa, Meng Yulu played the ukin, Li Ping'er didn't know how to play musical instruments, and held a pair of red ivory elephant boards to playtime accompaniment. And Simon King actually participated in it, and everyone sang preface to Liang Zhou. Then the beauty dispersed, and Pan Jinlian stayed in the garden, continuing to play and sing on the ukin. She actually learned the ukin from Meng Yulu during the previous 10 years of competition, and played with wine under the grape trellis. Then Chen Mai also came, coquettishly in Simon King's arms, showing the passion of a girl. All these vividly reproduce the romance and beauty in classical poetry. Soon, Jin Ping Mei again narrowly wrote beauty into the hopeless reality scene. In this most beautiful garden, the beauties of Simon King's garden continuously staged a series of crazy sex. From Li Ping'er to Pan Jinlian, from the Jade Pavilion to the grape trellis. The obscenity and violence in the pictures are really not enough to match the outside world, humane. Look at the beginning and end of this chapter again. The death of Song Willian's father Song Ren, which was supposed to end at the end of the previous chapter, was written at the beginning of this chapter. At the end, a little boy named Xiao Tiezong asked Chen Mai for some fruit. Chen Mai said, "I'm afraid Simon King will beat you if he sees me." Passed out, the period was filled with images of death and violence. From the perspective of storytelling and novel creation, we not only have to ask, why did the author arrange these third-level sex and violence scenes in such a beautiful garden? If the story of Jade Pavilion and Grape Rack is a complete whole, wouldn't it be disappointing to put Song Ren's story at the beginning? Little Iron Bar is such a small character that readers don't even remember it. Why is it deliberately ranged at the end of such a passionate chapter of the book? If we were looking at the clean version, these questions would never have answers. It is impossible for this book to quote those deleted parts, so readers cannot understand the sexual and violent connotations of the entire story through comments. However, as a reader with a strong personality, I hope everyone can reach a consensus. The Plum and the Golden Lotus it is by no means like the vulgar people claim that they relish in sexual descriptions and constantly repeat sexual descriptions. It can be said that almost all the sexual descriptions in The Plum and the Golden Ping are related to the theme and structure of the novel, the development of the story. The connotation, character and destiny of the characters are inextricably linked. Otherwise, why do Wu Yunyang, Meng Yulu and others never describe it in detail? In theory, lewd authors should not give up any opportunity to show off their talents. In fact, most of the descriptions of the drunken grape rack in this chapter are almost copied from the story of Ru Yijin, but the author inadvertently buried two meaningful dialogues in it. Pan Jinlian. I know you are annoyed with me, because Li Ping'er deliberately used this provocation to do something against me. After going through your tricks today, I won't dare to offend you again. Simon King smiled and said, "Little whore, it's easier to talk to you if you know." I don't know the meaning of this dialogue without reading the previous text, and I don't know the extent without knowing the background. Ordinary Jibin may even be castrated without hesitation, but this is the secret key to answering the above question. It turned out that the sexual intercourse between Li Ping'er and Simon King in the Jade Pavilion revealed that Li Ping'er was pregnant. Although it was a whisper, it was heard by Pan Jinlian. Her extremely sensitive heart in the struggle for favor immediately understood what was going on. Significance. Although Song Huilian is dead, Pan Jinlian is no longer in the mood to enjoy the beautiful scenery in the garden. While drinking and chatting, she started mocking Li Ping'er like a bride. Li Ping'er had no power to reply to Pan Jinlian's provocation, and Simon King did not dare to express too much in front of Meng Yulu and Li Ping'er. Supporting one to suppress the other for no reason would only lead to chaos in the family, so any made trouble by Pan Jinlian. It was against this background that Simon King deliberately used garden sex to abuse and punish Pan Jinlian in a way that was both reasonable and unreasonable, cruel and joking. As a result, Pan Jinlian almost fell into the grape rack, losing his life. How could you be so evil today? You almost lost your slave's life. I am now a boss with a stern look, and I don't know what to do. And this horrific sex, in the name of drunk trouble, absurdly intertwined between the beauty of the garden and the violence of death, further highlighting the cruelty of war for favor. 3. Preface to Liangzhou. The preface to Liangzhou sung by the beauties in the garden in this episode is surprisingly long, recorded in the portrait book, which deserves readers' attention. The poetry version often quoted the operas and lyrics of the time at length, while the portrait version ruthlessly deleted large sections. Many scholars believe that the rewriters of the portrait version were self-righteous and mistakenly regarded the treasure as dross. In fact, most of the lyrics and music in the Chihuahuan have nothing to do with the content and theme, and their inclusion completely undermines the beauty of The Plum and the Golden Lotus as a novel itself. Therefore, for those popular songs at the time, the embroidered copies often retained a title, it deleted the content. Needless to say, a long text like Preface to Liangzhou has its own profound meaning. Preface to Liangzhou wrote about the beautiful scenery of the garden on this day. It rained in the evening and passed through the Nangshuan. And I saw the red makeup on the pool was messy. The scenery is infinite. This scenery is still enviable. Peng Lai Langyuan is not enviable. These are good years after all. However, all this beautiful scenery ends with an aphorism adapted from Dong Po's poem. I am afraid that the west wind will startle the autumn again, and secretly I will not notice the passage of time. The beauty in the garden cannot conceal the cruelty of the battle for favor. The beauty of a moment in life cannot compete with the ups and downs and helplessness of life, nor can it compete with the passage of time and sorrow. People in the floating world have no time to appreciate these beauties. They have no intention to stop, no ability to wander, no self-examination and no awareness, and they rush towards the end of life. The war for favor will begin this time, and the Ximen family will usher in an unprecedented rise in prosperity. However, the west wind comes again. Just over a year later, Li Ping'er and Simon King died one after another, and the big family fell apart. Today the beautiful garden will soon become a pile of ruins. Perhaps this is exactly what is sung in A Dream of Red Mansions. The shabby room is empty. In the past, the bed was full of watts, and the grass and poplars were withered. It was once a singing and dancing place. The spider silk was covered with carved beams, And now the green gauze is stuck on the canopy windows. How can you say that the fat is thick and the powder is fragrant? How about your temples? Is it frost again? Yesterday the lowest sent bones to the dead. But tonight the Mandarin ducks are sleeping under the red light tents. The box is full of gold, the box is full of silver, and in a blink of an eye, everyone is slandering the beggar. I was sighing that others will not live long, but I know that I will return to mourn. A west wind, a coolness, and a startling feeling. However, the people in Jin Ping Mei are not aware of this. They are still busy with their own life stories. In the second half, a preface to Liang Zhou, Pan Jinlian sang, "Time flies as fast as lightning. It's a good night. But it's a pity that it's late." And I sing and laugh together. All they can do is enjoy themselves in time. As readers, we, watching them come and go one by one, ups and downs. What can you do while covering up? And looking at our own lives? Isn't it the same passing time and singing and laughing? 4. Research chapter, problems in the description of the whole book. As the most famous sexual description fragment in the book, Chapter 27 has been talked about and deeply criticized by the world. Furthermore, the plum and the golden ping, as a leader in sexual literature, also suffered the same fate. For hundreds of years, countless moralists have tirelessly criticized it verbally and writtenly, and countless scholars have reversed the verdict from various angles. Those who rebuke are nothing more than declaring obscenity and instructing evil people. If the crime is heinous, it should be burned out of print. If its flaws cover up its superiority, it should be castrated and deleted. And those who reverse the verdict are mostly due to the reasons of the times, human nature, etc. Gay-daming the dynasty was an era of extreme authoritarianism, an era of extreme disorganization, an era of highly developed Neo-Confucianism, and an era of expanded self-awareness. As a result, a large number of novels that fully describe sexual behavior emerged, such as Jin Ping Mei is just one of them. Of course, I'm here to reverse the case. But I am not an expert, unlike them who can study Jin Ping Mei from the perspective of the history of sexual culture. In my opinion, even though Jin Ping Mei was set in an era when obscene books were prevalent, or in other words, from the temple to the arena, people were fanatically pursuing sex. The era of pleasure is an era when literary figures, such as Tang Xianzu, Yuan Hongdao, Li Kaixian, and To Long indulge in sensuality. So what? What if the author just writes and plays behind closed doors? I can only want to return to the novel itself and talk about it. I think the sexual description of Jin Ping Mei plays a very, very important role in the whole book. Compared with other vulgar novels that use sexual description as fun, it highlights the value of the author of Jin Ping Mei as a first-class novelist. Here is a brief list. The first level of function, reproduction. Reproduction is the basic meaning of sex. Li Ping'er revealed the news of reproduction in Chapter 27, which relieved her sexual guilt. Later, Wu Yunyang and Pan Jinlian both worked hard for reproduction. Pan Jinlian was deeply jealous of Li Ping'er and Wu Yunyang, who had successfully reproduced. She was anxious about the possibility of procreating Ryer, and until the end Chun Mai expressed the reproductive significance of sex in the garrison mansion, because the reproductive mother was more expensive than her son. The second level of function, the extended meaning of sex and reproduction, power and status. Reproduction, especially sons, has the opportunity to change women's status in men's hearts and even in the family. Li Ping'er had both wealth and beauty, but giving birth to a son made her the most favored concubine of the Ximen family. The biggest gap between Pan Jinlian and Meng Yulu was here. After Wu Yunyang's wife gave birth to a son, she even dominated the Ximen family with one hand. Chun Mai was successfully rehabilitated after giving birth to a child in the garrison. Chun Mai became the most valuable slave and quasi-concubine because of her sexual relationship and the possibility of reproduction. Sun Zui was successfully promoted to a concubine because of her sexual relationship, even though it was a low-level concubine. Chun Mai and Sun Zui were successfully promoted to concubine because of their sexual relationship. The degree of difference and the possibility of reproduction determine the true status of the two. The third level of function, the enhanced extended meaning of sex and reproduction. The competition for favor and war caused by power and status. The Ximen family's ever-escalating battle for favor expresses this role, including the war between Chen Mai and Sun Sui and the war between Wen Yuhan'er and Meng Yulu. The fourth layer of function, the pleasure of sexual intercourse. In Jin Ping Mei, the greatest meaning of sex for women is reproduction, while the most common meaning for men is happiness. Of course, Pan Jinlian, Li Ping'er, Mrs. Lin and even Chen Mai are also willing to enjoy sexual happiness. Reproduction is of great significance to men. Although important, it is not as universal as sexual pleasure. The ultimate sexual pleasure in Jin Ping Mei is the monk's medicine. What is comparable to the nun's medicine for childbirth is that the monk's medicine is obtained by the monk. From Buddha to sex, the author may not be able to figure out the entangled thoughts in it. The fifth layer of function expresses the character's personality traits. There is a saying in the world that a lady is in front of others and a slut behind others. Novels can often be more exciting if they are depicted in a realistic way. When Jin Ping Mei depicts adulterous characters, such as Pan Jinlian, Wang Liuer, and Raiyer, it always places descriptions of language, actions, and expressions with distinctive character traits in it. This is what the author freely quoted and adapted from other adulterous books. The real power outside of the obscene clips is often ignored by readers and selectively abandoned by researchers. The sixth level of function expresses the character's thoughts and emotions. Li Ping'er's emotion, Ximen King and Wu Yunyang's burning incense on a moonlit night expresses guilt and reconciliation. Pan Jinlian's drunken and rowdy grape rack expresses anger and punishment. Li Ping'er's menstrual medicine test expresses love and happiness. Li Ping'er's death. Ximen King's lovemaking with Pan Jinlian and Meng Yulu is an expression of apology. Chen Mei's fake sister-brother secretly renewing Luanjia is an expression of longing and nostalgia. The seventh layer functions expressing the current situation of survival. Compared with the second level of rights and status, this level pays more attention to the meaning of sex to the bottom. Wang Liuer, Bai Sisao and other prostitutes of all kinds sell themselves for money. Song Huilian and Raiyer devote themselves to their masters in the hope of getting some benefits that change their life status, or even just a little pillar of stable reality. Chen Jingji contributes his backyard in a cold shop in exchange for a porridge and rice. Sun Sui finally eloped with Lai Wang, hoping to live a happy life as a young couple. The eighth level of function expresses the image of death. Wu Die's death image and Pan Jinlian's grape trellis image symbolize Ximen King's final sex and death scene. Li Ping'er's menstrual sex laid the shadow of subsequent death. Pan Jinlian's death scene is full of sexual imagery. Chen Mai died in the process of sex. Chen Jingji died in the bed after having sex with Chen Mai. The ninth level of function expresses the author's irony. The most typical irony is the sex war between Ximen King and Mrs. Lin, but to be fair, the control of irony throughout Jin Ping Mei is quite frivolous. That is, it is too exaggerated and deviates from reality. For example, in the final sex scene between Pan Jinlian and Ximen King, Ximen King is still burning with desire even though he is already very unwell. To extricate oneself is simply willpower rather than sexual desire in sexual intercourse. For example, after the death of Ximen King, Shui Shukai's memorial text nakedly wrote Ximen King as a penis in full view of the public, which simply regarded Ximen's family as having no one. Perhaps this expresses the author's more or less bad intentions. When the more you read, the less it feels like a novel. I want to remind you that this is actually a novel.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.